Hey everybody, it's Book of Katherine. So I'm about to get into the Messiah of the Old Testament and New Testament. But before I do that, I think it's really important to discuss the Bible, the Talmud, the Old Testament, the New Testament, what all of that means until we get into the Messiah. That's kind of a preface I realized to get into it because there's so many different things, different names, and we've talked about it on Twitter. We haven't talked about it here on my channel. And so I kind of want to lay some groundwork of the research we've done out there on Twitter. So to get an idea of what's happened to these texts, there's these ancient texts that have been around. It's just like anything else you've studied. Like if you study ancient Babylonian empires, or you study ancient Chinese empires or Japanese empires, if you study any of those ancient empires, there's all these glorious, glorious texts. The difference is that these specific texts for Hebrew, they have been controlled, unfortunately, by two central places, and that is the Vatican in Rome and also the Jewish Library, and that's in Jerusalem. Those two places have controlled texts to the point that you cannot actually, when we talked about stigmata online on Twitter, it's actually true, that part of stigmata. Most of stigmata is told fiction, but is the part that they talk about where you go into the Vatican Library and you cannot take anything out. For example, let me give you a quick, like what they're saying about, oh, give a piece of translation, single piece of paper, that sort of thing. That's not true. But what is true is they don't allow anyone who wants to visit the library, they don't allow you to take any note, like you can't go in there and take a sheet of paper. You can't go in there and like look up things and take photocopies. They don't have a copy machine in there. So if you want to take anything down, you have to go in, try and memorize it with your head, run out of the library and write it down. That's censorship of the highest kind. I mean, we have all these universities that share everything, and Rome definitely benefits from that. I mean, Rome actually has a system set up right now where they plunder the ideas of they actually, literally, Rome has a system where the American universities have a system where all the American professors set up projects for their students, and the students to give up all their ideas, think up ideas. They'll send them to places all over the world, to these little conferences. The students present their ideas or their intellectual property. The students give up the ideas. Rome will collect the best ones, have them present them in Germany, and then Rome will go ahead and use all of those ideas and profit. Trillions of dollars have been made off of American students' ingenuity. What do American students get out of it? Big fat zero. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They're told that they're saving the planet or that they're forwarding the future and things like that. So students leave. They leave the university. It's just like when students do athletics when they go into a college, and all of that athletic power, they're expected to give that up for free. Exact same thing happens with their intellectual property. And Rome benefits from their physical capabilities with the NCAA. Same thing with their mental capabilities. Happens in physics, happens in electrical engineering, all across the board. It's really, really scary what they have set up. But when it comes to sharing information they have, for example, the Hebrew Gospel of John, they don't share it. They have like one single page that you're able to, we got like one single page I found online that came out of the Gospel of John in Hebrew, the first page, and it was in their junk pile. That's how they left it in the junk pile. So someone found it on accident. So that's how they haven't taken all that great of care of it. They don't have it organized all that great, but they do keep it all there so that no one can get a hold of it. When it wasn't all locked down like that, then there's a big revolution in America happened. The right of kings lost all of their intellectual property. They found a way to get it back, but that's what happened when the first time anyone started translating it into English, into their own language, because they used to not let people listen to it in their own language and have their own hands on it. Everyone went to Geneva, translated it into their own language, and boom, the American Revolution happened. Everyone left. They went to the New World, started American free, like their own religious freedom. And next thing you know, they were like, wait a minute, these texts say that we're supposed to have individual freedom. There is no such thing as the divine right of kings. All of us are Jesus is saying stuff about we're not supposed to pay taxes. What is all this? Jesus didn't say that kings have the right to rule us. What are you talking about? And all of a sudden, next thing you know, there's American Revolution. Boy, did that teach Rome. Rome locked down that stuff really quick. So Bibles are really, really important. They're linked to whether or not you have rights or whether you don't have rights over the history of the world. That's what we've learned. So, and so are the Hebrew texts, the Jewish library. They have very, very strict control over their texts. It's all the same thing. The Hebrew text, the Greek text, those are the two places they are locked down hard. And they are shared libraries, by the way, those two libraries. So I wanted to describe to you why they're so important. And I wanted to give it in a relatable way, because now that I've been studying these a lot, I wanted to give it in a way that's a bit relatable for you guys. So, this is a map. So I want you to just think about this. You know how you guys study maps? Like, think about like if you look on MapQuest versus Google Maps. Let's say that you want to go to a city and you've never been to that city before, and then someone hands you a paper map, and you've never studied a paper map before, and you're like, oh crap, what do you do? So you go to Google Maps, and you're like, oh, I know how to read this, and then it crashes. Google, for some reason, crashes, and you're left with MapQuest, and you're like, but then you're like, oh, look, they have all these different places, all these different restaurants I've never heard of, private restaurants, because Google Maps usually hides all the private restaurants and pushes up all the food chains. And so now you're getting to see other private restaurants, but yet they also have it all labeled in different colors. The readability is totally different. So there's same city, same exact locations, 3 different ways to see it: paper map, MapQuest, and Google Maps. Totally different way to read the exact same place. That's what it's like trying to get to the Hebrew text of the Talmud. It's just the Hebrew text, like the book of Isaiah, or the book of Ezra, the book of Enoch, all the same thing, all in Hebrew, right? And then there's getting to the books of the Gospels. We know some of them were written in Hebrew. It makes sense. Everybody wrote things down. This guy, Jesus, had a ton of followers. Where are the Hebrew texts? Why are they hidden? Who's keeping them hidden? Then they're in Greek. Some of them are kept in Greek. We know that Revelations was written in Greek. But when you break it down, it looks like the guy was actually someone who actually knew Hebrew first and is trying to write it in Greek, and something that makes sense. And that makes sense because John knew Hebrew, wrote his gospel in Hebrew. We know that now. And then wrote it in Greek, a new language for him. So it's very, very similar to that. So like, for example, if you see this map here, this is a map of the entire world, right? Back in the 1200s. That's the entire continent of Europe and Africa. Europe, Africa, India, and Russia. Isn't that crazy? And Japan's all the way over here. So this map, you can look it up online. It's called, let me see what it's called. So you can look it up online. Again, I posted this on YouTube. So, oh no, tell me I didn't hurt it. Hold on. Oh, there it is. That's right, the Catalan. It's 1375, the Catalan maps. So in 1375, and actually, it was Jewish traders who did that. The Jews knew it better than anything because they were all over the world and trading. So, and that goes to the whole idea that the gospel did go to the end of the earth because Jews considered them, that when Jesus Christ came, he was a Jew, and they considered the gospel to be a Jewish tradition of carrying on being the Messiah. I'll get to that in the next one. So anyway, so look up the Catalan map. Now, that doesn't look anything like the continents we know today. So it's the exact same thing when you look into these texts of the Bible. When you start reading the Bible of today, it's nothing like the Bible of before. You start today, it's nothing like what the Bible was or what the Talmud was, just the name for the Hebrew Bible, the Jewish Bible. It's nothing like what they used to read in the past. And I want to explain why that is. Like, Jordan Peterson said an amazing thing. I want to explain why the maps look different. Why you can go to every different society and their map for the same place, essentially, is what I'm saying. Why is the map for the same place look so different? Why is that? Why can you go to the same exact place and the map just looks so completely different? And I want to explain why that is. The reason why that is there's the same thing. The Romans have a library and they lock it down, right? Well, emperors got involved in this thing called, it'll go way back into it, but when you look into these things of like the Council of Nice and the Council of Nicene, when you hear that certain books were cut out, that's really the big differences when you go from like the Hebrew book to Bible or the Talmud or this or that or different translations. What it comes down to is like certain groups and societies cut out books and some keep books in. Cut out books and keep books in, and cut out books and keep books in. So now people like, oh, they don't have the book of Enoch in. I saw somebody on Christian Broadcasting, they're like, my pastor's teaching on Enoch. And the guy was like, why? Why would you ever teach on Enoch? And I was like, is that some kind of joke? Are you kidding? Like, Enoch is actually mentioned in the New Testament, in Jude. It's actually mentioned. It's considered to be, once it's mentioned in there, once you can cross-reference it with the others, according to basic English literature standards, that means it's in. When they're referring to it, that means it's in. And I don't understand this whole idea of what's inspired literature and what's not. That means you're not supposed to read the other literature. When the heck did this whole burning books, you're not supposed to close your mind to anything? We've started, I know for sure, I've started ordering books from the black magic side of things. And I'm like, oh, this is good to know. This is good to know so that I know when I'm watching a show, or I know when I'm watching a girl walk by, I know when I'm seeing this, that I know I'm watching black magic being practiced. Does that make sense? Since when is banning books and censoring books ever a good thing? I thought we were against Hitler for banning and burning books. Never a good thing. So, for example, a great book that I found was Book of Judith. Incredible book. A lot of the books that they've taken out, the people who have taken out these books, sorry, I'm in a lot of pain, so I'm kind of like all over the place. I'm sorry, you guys are just going to have to deal with it. Let me put this book away because it's super heavy. Hold on. So, what I'm trying to say is, I would encourage everyone to read as much as they can, not exclude books. And I would very much warn anyone from saying what book is blessed and not blessed, because the people who said a book is blessed and not blessed, for example, like Emperor Constantine, yeah, the guy who boiled his wife to death. Like, really consider the source on this. The guy who knocked Enoch out of the Christian Bible was the guy who burned his wife to death in boiling hot water. Yeah, consider the source. I'm not kidding about this stuff. Saying that, oh, it's too scary for society. Then you read Enoch and you find out, oh, well, that's when you learn how black eyeliner is how witchcraft came into being. Like, you learn all this other stuff about the importance of evergreens and the cedars of Lebanon, why it turns out the Jewish temple is actually called like a cedar of Lebanon temple, cedars of Lebanon. That suddenly becomes important. I bet people would have been visiting the cedars up in Lebanon a lot sooner. Instead, Rome got the freedom to cut them all the heck down and had ships that were able to create war and conquer the earth because they were chopping down the cedars of Lebanon. And instead, because they were able to cut out Enoch, no one thought that they were holy. No one knew that they were a holy temple or something to protect. Nor did they think anything special of the giant sequoias in California. I certainly didn't know anything about them. I didn't know they were called God's fruit that he specially planted. That might have been important as a young Catholic girl. I might have held them in a bit more deeming respect. Instead, I just was like, yay, we can drive a car through them. I didn't know there's anything special about them. I thought every single continent must have things like this. Nope. Turns out I grew up in an area, only one of 2 areas in the entire planet that had these 317-foot trees, you know, that had grown for 3,500 years. But hey, Lebanon chopped them all down to conquer the earth. Just very, very important books that connect everything. And you can see how much power it brought them to have these books locked down, because they certainly read them. Words like Megatron and Metatron. And let me give you an example. Let me give you a real clear example. Like, for example, most of the Nobel Prizes, the majority of the Nobel Prizes have gone to Jewish descent, right? And people think, oh, that means the Jews are in power. I don't think so anymore. I have read through the Jewish literature now. I have now read through Enoch. I have now read through the Astir. I have now been reading through their prior books, all these things that Christians, just because Roman emperors who boiled their wives to death and killed their nephews and their sons said, bad, bad, bad. Apparently they thought that meant God doesn't want you to read it. Yeah, that makes sense. So they have access to those books. They have access to those books, which means they now know that cattle was set aside as an actual animal group. It's like actually God said that there were 4 types of animal made. It literally goes through in the book of Adam and Eve. There's all these different creation books. That Genesis doesn't have one story. There are numerous books that tell the creation of Adam and Eve. And it actually sets aside cattle as a type of animal that was made on a certain day. And then my friend came back to me. She went and studied it all. And she came back just yesterday and she's like, you know what? Did you know that cattle is like she's like, it's the only animal where all of its parts can be utilized to stay alive. Did you know that? And I'm like, no, like, because I remember I kept reading it over and over with them. I was like, and cattle, 4 types. Let me read this again. Cattle's a separate type that was created on that day. It's not one of the animals. It was like separated out from the animals. It was like cattle and then birds and then fish of the sea. Cattle, then fish of the sea, then this. Yeah, well, when you have special knowledge like that, it kind of affects your research, don't you think? It gives you some amazing nudges in which way to go. So I'm not so surprised if it was a Jewish person who went down to Latin America and discovered, oh my gosh, the first saber-toothed tiger. Oh, you know what else Enoch tells you? By the way, Enoch tells you that, mountains of gold and silver are at the North and South Pole. Like they tell you, tells you at tips of the poles, it tells you certain mountains of gems. And then we go look down at the South Pole and what do they have? They have all these things of ice and then oops, like they're holding one that's cracking. They have to have special things around it. And it looks like diamond ore. Other places down at the edge of the earth. Guess what we looked up? It said there would be mountains of jade, and we looked it up, and there are big, huge mountains of actual ore, of everything it says in Enoch. And why did we look it up? Do you think we would have looked up mountains of gemstone? Do you think that that is something that us just sitting around normally, lolly-da, would look up something like that ever? Unless we're sitting here reading it, and we look it up, and in Canada, there's some huge green mountain. In Australia, sitting huge green mountain. They had the ability, you know, King George III was famous for his maps. No kidding. No kidding. Kind of a leg up when you have all of these Hebrew texts. So when it comes to the Bible, my point is, if you don't want to read the Bible because you think it's some spiritual hubbub, if you don't want to read the Torah because you think it's some spiritual hubbub, if you don't want to read the Talmud because you think it's some spiritual hubbub, maybe you want to read it for some Wall Street tips. Ayo. Maybe you know what? The next big, huge, movie is in Hollywood. Like, there are some, I know because of my friends in Hollywood, I know that some of the apocalypse movies and TV shows that have been in the last, let's just say, last 10 years, some of them have been were made way ahead of time. And I'm like, gee, the ones that are eerily, they're like, this is eerily, when there are like panels and they're like, how'd you know? How'd you know? How'd you get it so spot on? How'd you get it so spot on? This is so creepy. And they just had it in the back pocket waiting for it to happen. And then when it happened, oh, they release it. You know how often that happens in Hollywood? How do they know? So why don't you actually just read it for that? Banning books is never a good thing. And maybe you should put some pressure on the frickin' Vatican to maybe share a bit, since we're all sharing our frickin' kids with them, giving us all their intellectual property for free. And then they charge us and say, you pay us $150,000 and then you give us your intellectual property. Since we've been doing them, making them all these BASF $150 trillion a year, why don't they go ahead and give us their intellectual property and give us some freaking extra Enoch tips? They got some extra pages in there. Hand it on over, baby. Hand it on over. All right, I got to go teach this next part, which is all this, like, what the heck is this, since we have the Black Plague on us now? So what is Revelations talking about? They talk about who has the mark, who has the mark. Well, who the frick doesn't have them? When they're like, who are the saints? So I've had to study freaking hard about that and try to figure out, because trust me, you get enough people, we all know that there are people who come at us and you're like, I don't think they're getting into heaven. They come at us and they're like, oh, and you're just like, there ain't no way that person's holy. So I've had to do some serious studying in the last 6 months. Booyah. So I'm going to give you what I found. All right. Love you guys so much. Please donate $1 before it is a new month. It is October. It ain't September anymore. So new just $1. You know you don't miss it. You know you don't miss it. You don't miss it. You don't miss it. It's just PayPal $1. You won't even miss it. Maybe add on that 50 cent. I'll talk to you later. I'll talk to you guys later. And subscribe down below so you don't miss any of these. Because, you know, I don't have a schedule. I just, when I can, because of my health. Ooh, and I start my FND clinic soon if I'm healthy enough to get down there. My big FND clinic that I got into, so that hopefully I can one day do a schedule. Wouldn't that be amazing? All right, love you so much. Mwah, bye.